Hello, and welcome to the Straight to the Source podcast. I'm Tanya Barr.
And I'm Lucy Allon, and we're looking forward to taking you straight to the source of the people driving our food and hospitality industry forward. Hello, everyone. Today, we are going straight to the source with Jules Bagnato, co-owner of Brae Restaurant in regional Victoria, alongside her husband, renowned chef Dan Hunter. Beyond operations, Jules has shaped Brae's identity outside of the kitchen, from guest suites and storytelling to community impact and sustainability. And under her leadership, Brae has become Australia's first 3-star food made good restaurant, setting new standards in hospitality, design and purpose. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the studio, Jules. Hi, how are you today?
Hi, Lucy. Lovely to be here. I'm well, thank you.
Before we dive into our conversation, I'd love you to just quickly tell us a little bit about the beautiful Otways hinterland region that Brae is located in.
Sure. So we are 90 minutes from Melbourne, and the Otways, I suppose, is most known for its natural beauty. It's the national parks are full of waterfalls. So there are dozens of walks that you can take into the bush, short, long, all types, and most of them end up at some gorgeous waterfall. So we're surrounded by all of that. And then just a short drive away is the Great Ocean Road. So it's a very naturally blessed part of Victoria. I think it's probably my favourite part of Victoria because we have it all. We're fairly close to Melbourne, only an hour and a half, and we've got the beach and the bush on our doorstep. And then there's this real attention to good quality produce here. So a lot of farming, a lot of organics. And so that's really what attracted us to the region.
And so Brae is a restaurant, it's an organic farm, you have boutique accommodation, and it's really deeply rooted in the surrounding landscape and obviously, you know, the landscape you've just described to us. Give us, just before we sort of talk about Brae in a bit more detail, give us a little bit of a snapshot into your earlier career and how, I guess, it prepared you and laid the foundation for you to tell this beautiful story of place through hospitality and I guess the design of Brae as well, you know, from all the touch points that the customer experiences.
Well, I suppose I never firstly expected to end up in hospitality, owning a restaurant or anything like that. When, you know, I started out working, it wasn't something on my horizon. I studied economics and marketing at uni and worked in corporate jobs while Dan was training to be a chef. And then later I went back and retrained in adult education. So nothing to do with hospitality at all. In 2003, together, Dan and I moved to Spain. And that was so Dan could pursue this goal of working for some of what were then the most exciting restaurants in the world. So that was a big leap of faith for us. We left Australia not really knowing any Spanish, just a very rudimentary Spanish, and
jumped in the deep end.
Yeah. Just we were young and stupid and thought, why not? You know, you can. And so
young and fearless, I think, not young and stupid.
Yeah, probably, yes. And Dan ended up working ultimately in the Basque Country at Mugaritz, where he became a head chef there, the head chef at the time. So I wasn't working directly with these high-end creative restaurants, but I was very much aware of what was going on and immersed in that culture. And that's, I suppose, the start. I didn't realize it at the time, but the start of my journey with this type of hospitality. What was happening in Spain then was very different from what was happening in Australia in gastronomy. They were experimental, they were creative in ways that we hadn't even seen before. And I'm not just talking about the technicality of the food, but also the conceptual ideas of what a restaurant could be. They were very connected with their landscapes, very connected with culture, and basing their cuisines on things like memories and sounds and all these exciting things that had never been even considered before in Australia. And this was just such an eye-opener for us. It was a really wonderful way to experience a new country for the first time. We ended up, we went there with the intention of going for maybe a year or so and ended up there for 4 years. And so when we returned to Melbourne in 2007, it was with all of that information. It was like, for me, that was the only thing I knew about restaurants. I hadn't been involved in restaurants in any way. And this excited me, it was all of that creativity, but it was also the fact that we started to experience restaurants the way European people do while we were there. And it meant getting on the road, driving, learning about the place and the culture and the traditions of that restaurant when you went to them, because that was so much part of the experience. And so
that curiosity.
Yes, yeah. And we took that home with us and thought, well, this is what we should be doing in Australia in restaurants. And I didn't necessarily want to be doing that myself, but I started to wonder why in Australia really what we were doing is cooking European food, other people's food, and why we hadn't started using our own backyard, our own landscapes and culture and history to present something a little bit more immersive and a little bit more meaningful in our
absolutely. I think it's that sense of hospitality is more than just the plate of food. It's that sense of place. It's that sense of the memories that you're building. And I guess to see that in Europe through fresh eyes, you were able to then really understand what the value of what you took from those dining and cultural and immersive experiences. And you were able to sort of work out how to apply it to what you were planning to do here in Australia. And I know that you and Dan first I guess brought the Royal Mail Hotel in Dunkeld to international acclaim in starting to sort of experiment with that in what you were doing there. And so how did this whole experience of Europe and then what you did at the Royal Mail Hotel end up shaping the vision for Brae?
Well, it was, Dunkeld was accidental.
Oh, okay.
When we returned from Spain, Dan was kind of unemployable. He had this, I think, creative vision that hadn't been explored yet. So he didn't want to go into a restaurant that was established and cook someone else's food. I think he needed space and time to work out for himself what his own cuisine was going to be. And so when this opportunity in Dunkeld came up, we just saw it as a way for a short period of time to get out of town. Dan could have his own kitchen. He could, play with what he wanted to do in terms of his own cuisine. And we'd see where it went. Probably we thought at that time it would lead to him eventually having his own restaurant, I think. But certainly I wasn't putting my hand up to be part of that at that point. I went to Dunkeld and they had to find me a job, essentially. So I automatically, I suppose, fell into the PR and marketing side of things, ultimately taking over that role for the hotel. And Dan and I were kind of, for the first time, thrown together into working together in a way that we'd never really planned or wanted. But we embraced that because I think there was an excitement to it, knowing that we did have some control over the future of this place that we were working at. And, we had something good to draw on. We had some good experiences to draw on. So we started looking at our work there in Dunkeld, the way the great restaurants of Spain and other places in Europe were doing at the time, which is to tell this story of place, to take inspiration from the landscape and the natural beauty the place where you are and begin to tell the story of that place. So Dan, used all of those new techniques that he learnt and applied them in ways that were very specific to the location. He connected with the small scale producers of the region, and that was how he formed his cuisine. And then, we started to take inspiration from all of that natural. It's an amazing natural place, the Grampians. It's beautiful, and took inspiration from that to encourage people to come out and see it and enjoy it and do the road trip. Get in the car and do what they do in Europe and hit the road and go and eat, high-end gastronomy, creative cuisine in a location where in Australia really it hadn't been done before at that kind of
very unique location. Yeah. We were lucky enough to take a group of chefs and industry professionals out there actually in April 2016. So after you and Dan had moved on to Brae by then, and Robin Wickens had taken on the role, and it was such a journey of discovery and just a sense of place, and we really felt immersed in it. And I'll never forget walking around the kitchen garden, and we discovered wasabi was growing in the corner of the garden, and who would have thought wasabi was growing in the Grampians? And it was a truly spectacular experience. So I totally understand, that reference that you're making about just hitting the road and discovering and exploring. And I think that you can really, I think that sense of discovery is a very creative and powerful palette, like to work with. And I can understand how, that was what really gave you the ability to then grow into that vision of what you have gone on to create at Brae. Did it take you long to find a site like Brae, or did you come across it and just know immediately that was the site that you...
We spent years. So after about 3 years of being in Dunkeld, we knew that it wasn't for us. So for many different reasons. So there was stuff going on there that made it both very beneficial for us in terms of learning, but also made us understand that we probably need to be able to shape the culture of an organisation. There was a period there where there was no hotel manager in place, and we actually had to take over the financial running of the hotel for a period. And that really was the learning ground for us. That experience is what solidified for us we could actually do this. So I think it was that experience of Dunkeld. Had we not gone there, I don't know if I would have ever put my hand up to run business, but it was that
baptism of fire, maybe.
Totally. And we just decided, well, if we are going to do our own thing, that's what we need. We need to make a move. We need to make a move, and I think it forced us to realize that we needed to shape a culture, and Dan needed freedom from, someone else owning the business.
Any restraints.
Yeah. To do what he needed to do.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the fact that, you came into Brae with that foundation and that mutual vision for what you knew you wanted to achieve and felt like you could achieve. But also I think with, you having not come from or up through a traditional kind of hospitality career background, I feel like that sort of maybe expanded the boundaries of for what was possible, because you didn't really know that there were any limitations. You just could see what was achievable, which is very exciting.
Yeah, I think that experience in Spain really did just that. We just thought that's what we're going to do. Naively, we're just going to create one of those great restaurants that exists in Europe, but it's going to be in Victoria.
I think you have to have that leap of faith to be able to do it. I think if anyone sat down and put it on paper, it would never look like a good business plan. I think you just have to go with your gut and your instinct and your passion for creating something that you really believe in. And I think that's what's really come through in Brae. And so having not come through like a traditional hospitality background, like How did you see your sort of leadership and creative input? How did that kind of come to complement what Dan was doing in the kitchen? Did you know what that was going to look like, or did you just go on the journey and did it evolve?
No, I think and even before we decided where we were going to be, we were very clear about what we wanted Brae to be. So, I think that was informed by my, experience in, doing economics and marketing and that sort of thing, because there was no way I was going to go into a business without it all being spreadsheeted and, marketing plan done and business plan done. We were very thorough. So we knew exactly what we wanted. We had this vision of it was based on the very creative and aspirational cuisine, but it was a regenerative agriculture project based on the landscape, a place where people could escape to nature from the city. So it was very intentional at all times. And I suppose my role, I see it as really being a facilitator, I suppose. So it was my role to put all those structures in place, put all the procedures and the policies and the structure so that those with the hospitality skills could do what they do best with everything in place so that they could function, and so that we could clearly communicate to the public, to our team, to everyone we needed to communicate what our vision was. And so that Dan had the freedom then to go ahead and experiment with his cuisine and do what he needed to do to what he aspired to do, which was the creative side of it. So I think that my role was a support and a facilitator to allow that all to happen.
But also a very important part of that, because you created the roadmap that I guess made it possible by creating those processes. And without all of that, the hospitality experience doesn't come to life, because you don't have everyone kind of on the same page of what you're trying to deliver. So I guess, you're the conductor.
Yeah, and it's not only the policies and procedures, it's formulating the vision for it as well, because we spent a lot of time, years, discussing what this place was going to be, and the formulation of that vision is what makes it happen. It doesn't happen without having thought through it and really considering what it's going to be. So I think that was a big part of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned before that creating a workplace culture and the values that, you really wanted to come through in your team and your business. Tell us a little bit about that and how you've gone about sort of intentionally creating that and those pathways for your team to sort of step forward into their roles and then even forward into leadership roles.
Yeah, well, we're very intentional both with the way we see our roles as leaders and in the vision for the business. So I think that what we tend to do is focus on clarity in terms of what we are, what Brae is, but also what vision we have for it in terms of, a greater overall vision, a mission, and communicate that in a way that our team understand what we stand for, what we value. Because, I think a lot of hospitality businesses can be, you come to work, this is your job, you do your tasks, but being just task-based doesn't give the bigger picture. I think we try to give clarity around what the bigger picture is, what is Brae's purpose for being here. It's not just growing the food, putting it on the plate, serving the guests, cleaning the rooms, all of those tasks. They're managerial tasks. They're not leadership tasks. Being a leader is about having that overarching vision and being able to communicate that well so that the people who are working within the organisation know why they're there. So it's a communication of that purpose, that why. So we spend a lot of time on that. And I think that what that does for our people is it creates a calm, it creates a safety for them. They know that they are there for a common goal. And we're also very clear. We're clear around their roles, but we're also clear around their behaviours. So we set out to create a culture where respect is very prominent. And so people coming through are expected to follow that as well. So it's all intertwined and based on, our values, and we're trying to communicate those constantly. And we don't do that all on our own. We use external, trainers to come in. We've worked with 3 different trainers over the last probably, 7 years or so, who come in and deliver over a year or so or more, different seminars and team workshops that help us all to be on board with all of this.
That's great. And I think that, hospitality is a people business, and we're in the business of looking after other people. But if we don't look after ourselves and our team, we can't do that. So I love the intentionality around that. And the fact that you actually bring in external people to do that, because that is, you and Dan are going on that journey with the team as well. So you're both leading it and you're a part of investing in that as people yourself. And so I guess that leads me to talking about, or asking you about, sustainability as the broader vision for the restaurant. And I want to talk about your Food Made Good accreditation. But before we do that, how do you define sustainability for the restaurant or for the business?
Yeah, sustainability for us is one of the values that we work towards. It's part of a larger framework that guides all of our behaviours and decision making. So it's really important, and all of our team and most of our public know, I think, that is something that we value. In terms of defining it, we use what the Sustainable Restaurant Association have as a framework to guide us. So they have, their assessment is a 360-degree assessment of all parts of a restaurant business. So the 3 parts that they call them pillars, it's environment, society, and sourcing. So that's what we set out to do, to make sure that in terms of environment, we reduce our environmental footprint by using less resources, creating less waste. So for environment, it's things like our composting program, we have solar energy, we reduce paper use by not printing a wine list anymore. We have it on an electronic tablet. We use milk from a supplier whose bottles we return. It's Schultz Organic Dairy.
Schultz
Organic. So there's a lot of, there's hundreds of different tiny little pieces that fit into that. Then there's society. With society, we aim to leave our community with a positive impact. So there's various things we do under that. And with sourcing, it's all about traceability. So knowing who our suppliers are, knowing them by name mostly, and making sure that their systems and will align with what we want in terms of environmental sustainability, but also fair trade and making sure that the quality of the ingredients are the absolute best. So it's a really intense and quite overall holistic vision for sustainability. It's not just reduce waste.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Brae has become the first restaurant in Australia to earn the Sustainable Restaurant Association's Food Made Good 3-star rating, which is an amazing achievement. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Why was pursuing the accreditation part of it, was your intent to have that accreditation to be able to show to the world that you were doing what you were saying you were doing, or was there a different intent behind wanting to have that formal acknowledgement?
Yeah, we have been working towards the accreditation for many years. We first heard about it when we were on the world's 50 best list in 2017, and we were invited to put in an application for their sustainability award. And that is assessed by the Sustainable Restaurant Association. So that was our first exposure to them. And for that, we had to complete their questionnaire. It's a preliminary questionnaire, which is the first step in the accreditation. So that exposed us to the 280 questions that they ask about your entire business.
That's a lot of questions.
It's a lot of questions. It takes a lot of time. And it really opened our eyes to what the definition of sustainability for a restaurant can be and should be.
Yeah.
And that really started our proper, goal setting for this is something that we want to do. So I suppose there's two motivations. One is learning and to have it as a framework, because it's very, very good as a guide. Because without something like that, I think you can get a bit lost in the millions of things that you can do towards sustainability.
And overwhelmed as well, don't you think?
Totally. And what it does, it prioritizes things for you, because their whole assessment is based on all of this rigorous study that has been put into it to recognize where restaurants can have the greatest impact. So you might be like, we're growing our own food here, and a lot of people think, oh, you must have got 3 stars because you grow your own food. Growing your own food, in fact, has very little impact. And that's something we learned through the accreditation. But what they do is highlight which areas you can make tiny tweaks that have a much bigger impact. And then you can do things that might cost you a lot of money, and you realize down the line that didn't even have much impact on sustainability. So it's a learning process, but also obviously we wanted to be able to tell people that what we are doing is valid, that it's not greenwashing, that it's not just jumping on a bandwagon. So it was a bit of both of those two things, I think.
Yeah. And it sounds like it was a huge learning curve. And like you said, the things that I think a lot of people do or think will achieve the sustainability kind of outcomes aren't necessarily always the obvious ones. Is there one example you could give us that really stood out as something you just had never really considered or thought about before when you were going on that journey?
But I think the thing that did, that did stand out was the fact that I thought, because we were growing our own food, that we, were kind of doing enough, but we weren't. Things like where you're sourcing your electricity from is very important, and monitoring everything is very important. And that's something that I suppose was the biggest learning curve. And even just having policies and procedures written and in place, that is something that is very valuable, because without written procedures around, for example, what are our policies in terms of bringing in new produce? If you've got a meat, whatever it is, some eggs or whatever, and you want to bring them to Brae and show us what they are, we now have policies in place that tell us, if someone isn't using as a minimum, free range, organic, ethical standards of producing their dairy or their meat. We don't even take samples. We're not just looking at everything. Obviously, we're looking at only those items that fulfill our needs in terms of.
So it's given you that sort of the parameters within which you want to operate, and by operating within them, you're continuing to achieve your sustainability goals, which is wonderful. So let's talk a minute about society and community and connection, because when you're in a telling the story of place, then you're really telling the story of the place that you're within, and therefore the community that you're within. And I know that you and Dan have done a lot of work supporting local initiatives and schools, and you've raised a lot of money for the local community. Tell us about how you see Brae's role within the community and why that is such an important part for you to play.
I think something interesting about the assessment is that, or the accreditation, is the definition of community, because community by the Sustainable Restaurant Association definition is not just your local town. It's everyone you connect with. And that's something that has really opened up for us what we need to do to be sustainable. So yes, we do raise money every year for our local community, and we've raised $275,000 now to date in the time that we've been open. And that's really
amazing
to us. Yeah, it's fantastic. But that's off the back of the fact that in a small community, everyone contributes in some way or another, and a business like ours is ultimately going to have some impact. So we need to make sure that it's a positive impact. So, it was just that was kind of simple. We just decided that instead of putting our hands in our pockets for 10 different community organisations every year, we would instead be a bit more strategic and run a fundraising raffle and call on our wider network and be able to channel funds from outside of the community into our small town, which, it's kind of an obvious way of just maximising our time, money, efforts. But apart from that, with community, it's been really interesting to understand that everyone we touch is important, and something that we've done more recently is understand our responsibility really to our hospitality industry as well. And so we've put in place a apprenticeship discount where young apprentices who have who are enrolled in an apprenticeship course can come and visit us and get a 50% discount. And that's about making sure that our industry survives, that we have people coming through who have exposure to restaurants like ours. So we are looking at all aspects. Our staff come under that. Accessibility comes under that as well. So, are we thinking about everyone in our community? And our property is now completely wheelchair accessible, right through from accommodation, the restaurant and the farm. So you can go all through the 20 acres on paths in a wheelchair. It's about making everyone feel welcome and everyone being able to access us.
That's incredible. I mean, I love that saying that you can't be what you can't see. So by giving young people the ability to come and experience Brae and get a sense of what you've achieved and what is possible is so, so important, especially when we're trying to encourage people to come into our industry and understand the incredible opportunities that it offers. And yes, it is got its challenges like any industry, but there is so much potential. And I think our younger generation are very inspired by how they can make an impact within hospitality on, our environment and our communities and our well-being. So that's a very powerful way to communicate that to the younger generations. And so I guess off the back of that, I'd love to know, what do you think, what advice would you offer to young people who aspire to coming into our industry and, taking on leadership roles within the industry? What would you say to them?
I would suggest that they are very choosy about where they work and that they choose their jobs not by, I don't know, how many likes someone has on Instagram or how cool they are, but perhaps how good a leader they will be. And a good leader is about someone who will give you the time and the kindness to make sure that you are developed in your skills, and not just technical skills, but interpersonal skills as well, so that they're someone who you respect, who you look up to, who you like, who you want to be around, but that they're also going to give you the time, because we spend a lot of time at work, and it's not worth spending time in a workplace that disrespects you or makes you feel fearful or leads with cruelty or humiliation, because if you're seeing that happen, that's not normal. I think in the hospitality industry, this idea has been normalized that it's rough and that there's disrespect and humiliation is part of growth. It's not. Good workplaces have leaders who allow you to grow. They see the best in people and they allow that to be developed through support and through respect and compassion. And they let you be you. This is an important thing. I think that particularly for women coming through the industry, there's been a real blokey culture of you've got to be an alpha male to be a leader. You don't have to be. Leading well is leading with kindness, and you can be whoever you want to be. You can be any minority group if you've got a good culture to work within, because we don't value, all the alpha male stuff. We value respect and getting along and people being able to be themselves and not have to change the way they are in the world to get a leg up and become a leader.
Absolutely. And that's where people are given the foundation to also bring their value to the business and participate in the business's growth as well, which is so powerful. And I mean, thank God that we're having these conversations now and much more openly than we've ever had them before. And, really encouraging change within the industry to lead more from a place of empathy and kindness and creating strength through that. And so I guess looking forward to where Brae is heading and evolving to, not just as a restaurant, but all the other wonderful things that you're doing on the farm, the accommodation offering, your connection to your community, whether it's local or broadly. How do you see that evolving as a continuingly creative and sustainable hospitality model?
We've got a bit of a goal for the next 5 years to be a little bit more involved in education and sharing our story, sharing our sustainability and our regenerative agriculture project. That's kind of our goal for the next little bit. We've started working on that with some new guided tours that our head gardener, Joe Lawson, has started. And that's bringing people in, not just people who are dining either, but those who are visiting the region can join and have a fully guided tour with Jo across the whole property for an hour, and she explains all of her composting processes and biodynamics and organics. So we're trying to be a bit more involved with that, include the staff a bit more in that so they've got a bit more input as well. And we're opening it up now. We've started just a few small school groups as well. So we've got a sustainability statement on our website that's been there for quite some time, and we're always updating it with what we're doing. One of the local secondary schools is using that as a class. They're doing a sustainability unit and they're using that in that class as an example, and then coming out and we'll show them our accommodation, which is carbon neutral. They'll tour the regenerative agriculture project. They'll go into the dining room and talk to front of house staff about our non-alcoholic beverage program, which really relies on the farm, and then go into the kitchen and look at the waste and how that's managed there, and taste some waste recycle products in forms of ferments and preserves and that kind of thing.
What a great way for people to understand the whole journey of what's happening on the property, you know, from soil all the way through to the plate, and all those really intentional decisions that you're making to tell that story and create those experiences and memories. It's very, very inspiring what you're achieving at Brae, and I can only imagine are going to continue to really, move forward in a very strong leadership role in that sense. If you had to sum up your leadership philosophy in one single line, what would it be? Could you sum it up in one sentence?
I think leadership really is about getting the best out of people, finding people's potential, and having the courage to develop that potential. And I think key there is clarity and kindness, and doing it in a way that can make people feel safe so they can become their best. And that's how we get the best out of our people.
And I think you've really demonstrated that in our conversation today, but it's very much led by your incredible vision, your and Dan's incredible vision, and your absolute intentionality around every single thing that you do in the business. That's really come through in what we've discussed today. It's really quite incredible what you are achieving, and I really hope that anyone aspiring to come into the industry comes and takes a look at what you're doing. Anyone in the industry also considers what they're doing in their sustainability journey, and thinking more broadly about what that could encompass, other than, you know, some of the obvious ones about sourcing locally and reducing waste, all of which are super important. But, you know, there's a broader conversation and consideration there as well. It's been really wonderful to chat to you today. Before we wrap up, could I do a little quick fire round with you? So, what's your go-to coffee order on a busy Brae morning?
Flat white.
Is there a seasonal ingredient from the Brae garden that you're absolutely loving right now?
We've had our first avocados in the last couple of weeks, so that's been pretty good. First for this season.
What variety are they?
I think the ones we've been eating are bacon, which aren't my favourite. Ooh. But they're still good.
Okay, what's your favourite avocado variety?
Hass, I think.
Okay. What do you think is the most underrated role in hospitality?
Probably mine.
Actually, I don't disagree with you.
People wonder what I do all the time.
Well, it sounds to me like you're the person that is bringing it all together. You're the conductor of the orchestra. What's a sustainability superpower you wish everyone had?
Oh, gosh. A sustainability superpower might be knowing where your ingredients come from. And knowing who has actually produced them.
Yeah. And that's actually the whole intention behind Straight to the Source. And the question we ask all of ourselves and everyone we deal with is, do you know the source? What's a community project that's especially close to your heart?
I'm just going to say the one that we most recently have dealt with, because we just raised funds for our local hall. So we're going to get them a new kitchen, which is really exciting. So our community hall has been really underutilised lately for the last over a decade, because of this commercial kitchen that hasn't been able to be used. So we've raised $36,000 for that, which will contribute towards it. It's not going to cover it, but it's going to get them over the line, which is really exciting.
Oh, congratulations. And isn't that wonderful, because food brings everyone together?
Exactly.
If you could host one dream dinner guest at Brae, who would it be?
Oh, that's hard, isn't it? Oh, gosh. It would probably have to be one of my favourite authors, Haruki Murakami.
Wonderful. And final question, what's the best piece of career advice you'd ever received?
Oh, gosh. Do you know what? I don't know that I've received much good career advice.
I think I'm a bit the same. I feel like in my sort of time, you just sort of had to find your way in hospitality and kind of figure it out for yourself, especially from a front of house perspective. So yeah, it's a tricky question.
Yeah, but I do think that, that what I said earlier, which was to find a good leader, I didn't come up with that. I've heard someone say it. I can't remember who it is, but that's probably, I wish I'd had that advice. I didn't, but I think that when you're young, you're not looking for the right things in your career. And, it's good to give yourself permission to feel right at work. And I think that, I think that's probably the most important thing, that you need to feel comfortable. You need to feel like you're growing as a human.
Absolutely. Well, Jules, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today, and we look forward to continuing to watch you and Dan lead Brae and Australia's restaurant industry into the future. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lucy. It's been really nice to chat.
Well, that's a wrap on today's episode. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Jules for taking us behind the scenes of one of Australia's most inspiring restaurants and sharing her role in its creation. What Jules and Dan have achieved at Brae has set a benchmark of excellence that others in the industry look to, and those entering the hospitality industry should aspire to follow. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next time as we go straight to the source.